All right, welcome everyone to another Science on the Sound with a Mass Center Aquarium. We are super excited because our summer intern, Matthew, has virtually come back to us and is going to talk about some of the surveys that you all might have taken when you visited us for our marine mammal stewards. And so if you have any questions at any point, drop them in the chat box and we'll have a Q&A at the end. But without further ado, you.
So hi everyone. Like Ariel said, my name is Matthew. I'm a current undergrad with the University of Washington in the program on the environment, and I will actually be graduating later this quarter. But this last summer, I interned here or at the MAST, and I was the Marine Mammal Stewards Outreach intern there at the Redondo Center. And during that process, I administered surveys to a bunch of beachgoers, and these are more or less the results of my findings in my independent study that I did while part of the MAST. Let me go ahead and share my screen because I have a nice little poster for you guys. All right, so this is my project titled Making Waves, How Repeated Encounters Inspire Ocean Conservation. Like I said, I am part of the program on the environment with the University of Washington, and I interned at the Mass Center Aquarium. So just to provide some context and background on this issue, as most of us may know, marine mammals are facing increasing threats from pollution, habitat loss, and direct human disturbance, prompting a need for stronger public awareness and conservation ethics. Specifically, over just a 10-year period, over 43,000 marine mammals were stranded on the west coast of the US alone. In an effort to solve this, there has been immense growth in the world of informal education. This can refer to outreach programs, social media posts, newsletters, and even public announcements, essentially any education that takes place in an informal setting. But despite this worldwide movement to increase public awareness about the importance of marine mammals and the ocean as a whole, repeated human-wildlife conflicts and low public knowledge about marine mammal laws may suggest that education alone may not be enough. So this project moves to investigate the effectiveness of informal education in promoting action and retention of marine mammal information. So throughout my work, I use the guiding question of how effective is informal education in improving public retention of marine mammal knowledge and promoting conservation-oriented behavior? So fairly straightforward. So with the MAST, this last summer, I conducted education outreach about marine mammals in the Puget Sound, as you can see here in Figure 1. Over the course of this internship and my time with the MAST, I talked to over 1,500 people and was able to administer 67 surveys to willing beachgoers in the Redondo Beach area. These surveys first asked respondents to measure their own level of exposure to marine mammal education materials through informal means. It then asked them to answer a series of questions where they were asked to identify marine mammals as well as recall current marine mammal laws about these same animals. Outside of this internship, I did conduct a literature review of papers regarding education in conservation, specifically revolving around marine mammals and marine education. So as a result of this survey, I found notably that repetition matters. Participants with more frequent exposure to educational materials demonstrated higher correctness in answering questions, as well as reported higher confidence levels than any other exposure level. So as you can see here in Figure 2, those who were exposed as often as once or twice a week to informal education were able to answer questions more correctly than any other exposure level, suggesting that extremely high frequency may be the best bet. Oh, sorry about that. General results of the survey showed that identification skills were high, with more than 75% of respondents correctly identifying this marine mammal shown to them. But recall of marine mammal law was poor. Less than half the participants were able to correctly select marine mammal laws. This highlights an action awareness gap. I was also able to rule out cultural and specialization variables, such as residence length and water sports activity level, as these had no correlation to correct answers or confidence rates. This reinforces the suggestion that exposure frequency is the dominant factor when it comes to recalling marine mammal information. However, the ability to recall this information is somewhat undermined by the existence of the sentiment action gap that I mentioned earlier. This means that even with education and an environmentally conscious public, there is lack of action. This is a discovery I made when interacting with the informed public, whose were those who were environmentally minded were still somewhat unaware of actions they should be taking to protect the environment. I also discovered that informal education is widely supported by you guys, and the public, showing that there is at least a foundation for educational efforts and the role that it can play in conservation. So when comparing this to relevant literature, I found that my findings were pretty much exactly in line with articles out there. Informal education increases retention of information short term, yet long-term behavioral change remains limited. Studies also show that the public generally wants to be educated, but there are action gaps, with people often citing money, knowledge, or acceptance as primary barriers to action. So, what does this mean for the world of conservation and education moving forward? Locally, at least, awareness of marine mammal laws needs more emphasis in educational efforts, especially with our southern resident killer whales here in Washington and the harbor seal pups. Now, as many of you might know, these animals are super special to this area. The southern resident killer whale is an endangered species with different laws surrounding them than other marine mammals. Additionally, harbor seal pups are some of the most vulnerable marine mammals in the Puget Sound, especially during the summer months. And these are by far the highest percents of strandings that we see in the Puget Sound. In regards to educational organizations like the MASS and SR3, since reputation clearly improved retention, organizations can justify funding for recurring research and adjust education strategies accordingly. They also need to ensure that repetition is a key element in long-term planning and decision making. Now, this is kind of like the big find I have here. It needs to be a key element in long-term planning and decision making, especially since people lose interest or tend to forget things over time. Generally, however, increasing the public's confidence in marine mammal knowledge through informal education will help close this sentiment action gap. I saw this personally, as those who were more confident were more willing to take action, even though they may not know the right steps. Closing this sentiment action gap on a large scale and permanently will require social acceptance of conservation-related behavior, increased formal education, and overall support for conservation actions nationally and globally. And then a quick thank you to Ariel for helping me through my internship and helping me with skeleton articulation that we did along the time there. And I also had a faculty advisor that was kind of working behind the scenes with me at the university. And she helped me kind of shape and provided me with research or provided me with feedback during my research process. So thank y'all for listening to my quick spiel. Um, be more happy to go into depth if anyone has any questions or anything of the sorts.
Awesome. Thank you. This is a very enlightening. So got a few questions.
Yeah,
And
of course.
so first question that we have is, what did you think about your experience here at the Mass Center as one, an intern, but two, specifically an intern that is working with the public and doing education with the public?
So thank you. I generally extremely enjoyed my time with the Mast. I had previously worked with UW Sustainability and the athletic department, and my time as an educational provider for them was not nearly as motivating as working for the Mast was. Most of the people I interacted with when I was working for UW, they didn't really have that much of an interest in what I had to say and whatnot. Um, but working for the mast, everyone was super involved and it was really motivating for me.
Nice. You know, you don't have to lie just because I was your internship
Yeah, no,
supervisor.
it was great though. Yeah.
So that was some of the positives. What were some of the challenges or learning curves that you had to go through to be one of the stewards out there and feel comfortable working with the public?
Yeah, so the biggest obstacle for me was definitely just baseline marine mammal knowledge. I got a lot of really specific questions, and I had to remember going throughout time just to keep learning. Um, Learning things on a day-to-day basis and throughout the course of my internship really helped me tackle the questions I wasn't prepared for initially. Um, I also had a lot of interactions with people who felt very strongly about marine mammals. Um, Not only on one end of the spectrum that like marine mammals are need to be protected and cherished, and that was really helpful, but also people who thought of marine mammals more of a nuisance almost. and interacting with them and understanding where they were coming from was super important.
Nice.
Yeah.
So working with the public, you were educating them, but did you learn anything from the public while you had those conversations?
Oh, definitely. Very quickly, I learned to go into most of my interactions not expecting to be the one providing the knowledge, but almost the one learning. And I think that went a long way, especially interacting with a lot of the divers that we have down there at Redondo. So very knowledgeable people in the area.
Awesome. Well, that's good. You were talking about the different marine mammals, that one you were teaching the people about, but also the mammals themselves that might have been in the environment. So, what type of specimens or things did you use to help talk about those animals when there were no animals out on the water?
Yeah, so a lot of the days we were fortunate enough to have, I think we had like a river otter. We were fortunate enough to see the humpback whale, plenty of harbor seals in the area, and plenty of porpoises. When those were out, that was great because it was really easy for me to be like, look, they're right there, right? Um, but on days we didn't have those, it was super helpful to have these interactive materials that we had with us for marine mammal stewards. Not only do we have binoculars to help people see those animals when they were there, but also teach them how to use them and be like, if you there were a marine mammal, this is where you would look for them. We also had whales on the table, little toy whales. The kids absolutely love those. And it was a great way for them to come up, learn about the marine mammals, or demonstrate that they are already experts and know significantly more than I do. Um, but yeah, super helpful things. Identification cards were also really cool. Being able to teach people what to look for and how to identify different marine mammals was super helpful. Let's see, we also had just straight up images of marine mammals. So using those when they weren't around to show people what they would look like was also super helpful.
Awesome. So with kid interactions and just the general public, what was the most like common question or common like topic that you had to talk about?
Hmm. I think for me, because my internship was during the summer, and that is when harbor seals are around and pupping, I believe that is probably what I talked about the most, was the importance of staying away from harbor seals and harbor seal pups. Um, in terms of anything outside of that, I was I did talk a lot about harbor porpoises, I think, because for me personally, those I think are the most underrated marine mammal. They are by far the most like populous in the area, but they're also out and about. And a lot of people mistake them for dolphins in this area. So talking about those, explaining the differences between harbor porpoises and dolphins, um, something I talked about quite a lot. Yeah.
So those sound like really good interactions. But you were talking about some people are very passionate about these animals, and emotions can run really high, especially when you've got a lot of passion for something. So how did you deal with the public that might see those animals as you were saying that they might see them as nuisance? So how do you have that conversation? How do you try to bridge that gap of understanding with them?
Well, I think I approached it as don't let one bad apple spoil the bunch, kind of notion. There are, of course, reasons why animals act certain ways. They are, at the end of the day, wild animals. So if they're ever in a situation where they feel endangered, they are going to lash out. They are also there in the Puget Sound primarily because of food resources. And we have to understand we are like competing with these animals for especially like salmon. Um, so understanding that these people that have these feelings towards marine mammals are coming from a certain place and may have already had this negative interaction, but explaining to them that there is a reason for that interaction and that not all the animals are going to be like that. And they can continue to have positive interactions with these animals if they take certain steps to alleviate the pressures that might be there.
Awesome. So going back to your time at the Mass Center, you were doing surveys and this research. So you spent, I would say, what, like 90% of your time talking to the public, working with the public, right? So with all of that and your research that you have done, is there anything that you would change about our approach to marine mammal education or approach to outreach to the public?
So I was actually thinking about this earlier today. I think both SR3 and MAS can come together with a plan. because my research shows that repetition in such like quick succession matters the most. If there ever is in a season coming up that is especially important to marine mammals, I'm going to use harbor seals just as an example here. Maybe like during the spring and especially throughout the summer, ensuring that staying away from harbor seal pups is a big like effort in the educational realm. Because ensuring that repetition over time and for those few months will have, I think, the greatest impact.
So even though we've talked to probably those people once
Mhm.
before, it's very important for them and us to keep having those
Yeah,
conversations.
yeah.
Awesome.
It is the continued seeing and the continued exposure of this message that will go the furthest.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad there's some science backing up to keep having me have a job, I guess.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
um, so if people are interested in like becoming a marine mammal steward,
Mhm.
what would you say to them about, joining or the process? How would you get those people involved?
Hmm. I would say at the end of the day, even if you don't know anything, like I had very like baseline level knowledge coming into this, just do it. I mean, I know that sounds fairly like straightforward, I guess. But you do learn a lot on the job. And it is really rewarding to have positive interactions with the public, especially people you might know in the area. Um, and if you want to get like in the space, the mass is a great way to do that.
Awesome. So with all of your other parts of your internship, it was articulating skeletons. You were talking about using skeletons to talk to people
Mhm.
about them, but there's a long process before we've got a pretty little harbor seal skull sitting
Yes.
on that
Yeah.
table. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that process that you went through for creating some of those educational tools?
Yeah, definitely. So the mast receives a lot of specimens from Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, um, and they allow us to use those for educational purposes. But when we get them, they may not be in a state that is ready to be used for the public for various reasons. So if we do receive a live body, or if the mast does, it is then necropsied. So the cause of death is determined. It is then buried in either horse manure or cow manure to help the decaying process and to help like sterilize it. We then physically sift through the cow manure or horse manure to find the bones again. It is then a process of cleaning them manually, which I did quite a lot of. Just physically scrubbing bones and cleaning them with hot soap and water. Um, you then put it, I believe it was hydrogen peroxide and baking soda, lathered that onto the bones in a mixture, and then they sat. They sit in that mixture for quite a while, a few days, a few weeks even. Um, and then you can wash them off, and they hopefully are nice and clean and beautiful and ready to be used for education. Sometimes they're not though, so you have to do it again, and rinse them off with hydrogen peroxide and allow them to kind of be clean and make sure there's no diseases or anything like that that can be transmitted.
So it's a long, laborious process.
Yes, yes. It is also really painful when you have really small animals with really small bones, I will say.
And what animal are you talking about with
I am talking
that?
specifically about the river otter that I had to clean. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so with the Mass Center, getting tons of different various animals to talk about. Matthew was working on a river otter for quite
Mm.
a while. Small bones do not mean that they're easy to put together, but we have had some schools actually. We do a marine mammal CSI program where the kids learn about the cause of death for these animals and how to reduce the human impacts, but they put the skeleton together. So I can say, Matthew, your skeleton has been used quite a bit.
That makes me happy. Yeah,
And those high schoolers are also frustrated
yeah,
with the
yeah,
small bones.
yes.
Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
um, throughout that entire like cleaning process, like did it give you a better understanding of like why we do this as an educational tool, a better understanding of marine mammal impacts? How did that portion, I guess, influence you and your path of working with
Mhm.
these dead animals and using them for an educational tool?
I think for me personally, it was understanding that yes, we are like similar in the fact that we have like similar bone structures, similar anatomies, but also understanding that these are very unique and special animals. Not one of them is the same, even of the same species. Like they can have different bone structures, different growths, and things like that. And understanding that they are unique and special, I think was super helpful. And they're much more than just like, oh, look, there is a river otter, right? It is this living, breathing creature that is trying to make its way through the world just like we are. I'm sure if they had a Zoom call, they would also be talking about the same thing about us. Um, but yeah, it was super rewarding. Learning more about these animals was really cool and a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So with all of your experiences that you've had with us, you've graduated. What's the next step on the journey of your conservation biologist slash education,
Yeah.
environmental educator? Is there a next step that this internship has helped you on?
Yeah. So because of my previous experience with doing education for UW, I honestly kind of ruled out doing education long term, at least for myself. But the mass has completely like flipped that on its head. Um, and am now seriously considering doing some form of education into the future, especially informal education. It was a lot of fun to just go out there and kind of talk to people and see what they had to say. I do think I would like to try to combine that with some kind of field research. Um, Combining those two would be great. I've long wanted to do some kind of and something related to the environmental field, like physically in the field. I would especially like to travel, ideally go to either like Montana or Alaska, and do something where there's a little bit more of an untapped wilderness there. I know the field work in Washington is really cool, but I've also been here my whole life, so a little change would be nice, I think.
Yeah. Background for me, everyone. I was a terrestrial biologist that kind of got pulled into the marine environment. I'm not complaining. I love it. But I understand the wanting to take two of your passions of like the research with the education. And I think that's especially with doing internships at the Mass Center, we've got those opportunities. So for your fellow UW capstone potentials,
Mhm.
what's that like elevator pitch to them to make them come over to the Mass Center? I know we're a little bit of a drive, right? We're on opposite sides of the bay here.
Yeah.
But how do we get more of our UW students down here at Highline College's Mass Center Aquarium to do some of their study and some of their research?
I think knowing that the Mass does have so many opportunities is really cool. I think a lot of people, especially my cohort, have kind of gotten sucked into these internships with like there is one objective in their internship, and that is what they stick to, right? But at the Mass, there was it was a multifaceted experience for me. So I did several different jobs when I was there, and learned a lot more than I would have had I, say, strictly just been like education or strictly just been on like skeleton articulation. Knowing that there's a little bit of wiggle room in what you're doing, and that honestly, you can come down there and you guys will take all the help you can get, which is super awesome. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, I think that also makes a pitch for volunteers as well, that even if you're not going to school for this, if you're not trying to get credits, both high school or college, we do have a large volunteer team here. Can you speak to your experience working with our volunteers and everybody that you were able to, even with SR3's volunteers as well?
Yeah, so everyone I interacted with throughout this entire experience was super motivated and super interested, which was a lot of fun for me. Um, I honestly didn't have one negative experience, which I know sounds like, oh, he's just saying that, but I'm not. Everyone was also super knowledgeable. So not only passionate, not only like knowledgeable people, but they're just kind of fun. Hanging out with the mast, I got to hang out with quite a few people when I was doing education. There would be people out there with me, either from SR3 primarily or volunteers from the mast. And everyone was it's fun to hang out with during the summer and teach people. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you were one of the lucky ones that got to see the humpback whales when they
Yes.
were here
Yeah. Yeah.
for about a week. Besides them, I guess, what was your favorite marine mammal that you got to see or
Mm.
experience while you were here?
I hmm, that one's tough, honestly. Uh, I was. surprised by how many harbor porpoises I saw. There were a few days where I saw dozens of them, if not like 60, 70, like massive pods. Um, I think the coolest though was seeing the river otter. He like scampered right along the bulkhead, like right underneath where I was standing, which was really cool. But then was able to use that as a positive like teaching moment for a lot of people who like didn't know what a river otter even was. Um, that and then we did have a few harbor seals come up, but I do think the river otter was definitely the coolest for me. Yeah, aside from the humpback, of course, because that was
Yep.
pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to mention to the public about your experience, or your research that you did for your capstone project?
Hmm. It, if I had to leave this in terms of like next steps, I think for my research, of course, like scientific research is just that. It is just research and it can always be like improved upon, it can always be expanded upon. So just continue learning more about this and dive into how can we as people use this information to influence those around us, like just our family, our friends, those people who may also be interested in the topic, but may not th have it at the forefront of their minds, like some people do. Um, Keep talking to them, even if you like have to wear them down. It is clearly like repetition matters. So the more you talk about these topics to to the people around you, the more they will remember them, the more likely they are to actually take action on it.
Amazing. Well, with repetition wise, we are going into our fourth year of marine mammal stewards this next summer. We're super excited. And so if you've come down and you've talked to Matthew this last summer, please come down again. So we'll start our marine mammal stewards this spring and it'll go into early fall. We'll be out here at Redondo Beach and Des Moines Waterfront Park and the little jetty, the pier out there. So come find us in the blue vest. It says Marine Mammal Stewards on it. We're usually walking around either with skulls or pamphlets to hang out. So if you think you know everything, come by and teach us. But if you think like you're missing some knowledge, be sure to stop by our booths and say hello. Or if you're interested, like Matthew was saying, you're super passionate, you want to share some of this information, come join our stewards team. You can find information on the Mass Center Aquarium's website or SR3's website as well. If you're interested, even doing, articulation stuff, Matthew said, it was dirty work, but it was rewarding work. Um, we've got an articulation team here that we constantly are needing people to help clean bones, or put skeletons together so that we can continue educating the youth around here about the marine environment, marine mammals, and how humans impact them as well. But if you do have any questions following this video, feel free to reach out to the Mast Center. You can go to our website, mast.highline.edu. Otherwise, thank you, Matthew, for giving this talk and sharing this research that you did with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariel. I really enjoyed my time at the mast, so thank you for providing
You can
that.
stop lying now.
Yeah.
You got your grade. All right, everyone. Thank you.